So I'm broadcasting to you today on October 19th of 2017. And so if you are a market historian or if you turn on the financial news today, you know by now that today is the 30-year anniversary of October 19th, 1987, which is known as Black Monday, the stock market crash of Black Monday. I find that a lot of times time tends to dull the emotion of an event and make us kind of forget the extremity of the emotion that we may have felt on a particular day. And I think that event is kind of like that. It's a little abstract and it's hard to visualize exactly the kind of panic that was happening that day. But the facts are the Dow Jones lost just about 23% in one single day. It's the worst day ever in the history of stock market trading. To put some perspective around that, most of us remember 2008. The worst day of the 2008 crisis was a market drop of just about half that amount, 9.03%. To put it in the context of today's market, if we had an event like Black Monday in today's market, the market would drop 5,236 points in a single day, all the way down to a level of just about 18,000. We would lose just about $6 trillion in stock market wealth. Jeff Bezos's net worth would take a hit of about $17 billion in a single day. And Apple's stock price would drop to a single-digit price-to-earnings ratio. It would be a significant day, no doubt. So I'm kind of dating myself, but I do actually have some memory of that day. I happen to have been in high school at the time. And because the fact that my dad was a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, I was more aware probably of the stock market than most high school seniors. And so I remember vividly what it was like. That day, October 19th, also happens to be my parents' wedding anniversary. And they were in San Francisco that day on their way to a 10-day trip to Hawaii for their anniversary. Which they canceled and hopped on a flight and came back to Philadelphia. And I remember the story in the news was that there was a Merrill Lynch client down in Florida who walked into his broker's branch office with a shotgun, walked right up to the broker's desk, pointed the shotgun at his head, and shot him right there in the head and killed him because he'd lost so much money. He flipped out. So I remember the next day, when my dad was going to the office, that the mandate from Merrill Lynch was that they were to lock all the doors. My mom was, of course, petrified of what might happen. So it was indeed quite a scary day. But I think that some facts that are also really interesting are in order when you think about that particular day. Most people don't know this, but actually, the Dow Jones was actually up for the year that year, despite the fact that in one single day the market lost over 20% of its value. For the full year, the market was actually up that year. Right after the market crash happened, there was a group of 33 preeminent economists from all over the world who got together in Washington, D.C. to try to help evaluate what was happening. And they predicted that the next few years would be the most troubled time since the 1930s. Of course, that was completely false, and we were just on the brink of actually one of the greatest expansions in stock prices in the economy in history. Most importantly, that day, the Dow Jones traded to a low of just about 1,750 back in 1987. Today, 30 years later, the Dow Jones is just about 23,000. So I think the lessons learned from the Black Monday crisis are that, although a daily decline of 20% is nothing to sneeze at and is incredibly scary, it's also very common, even in a bull market, to have days where you have these extreme slides downward. In fact, if we look back all the way back to World War II, just about 70 plus years of time, the average annual decline from peak to trough in the stock market has been just about 13%. So on average, every single year since World War II, the market has had a moment where it's down more than 10% from its high. When this does happen, it's always scary, and it's always accompanied by gloom and doom from the experts. It's always accompanied by headlines in which expert predictions are that we're about to go through a terrible time and that things are awful. That's a feature of these kinds of market declines, and that ultimately the reality is that these declines are temporary. Market declines are temporary, but the overwhelming advances from a level of 1,700 to a level of 23,000 in a 30-year period of time are permanent. So my message today is happy anniversary to Mr. Market, and happy anniversary to Zeke and Chris.